Uzbekistan, officially the Republic of Uzbekistan, sits at the heart of Central Asia, a country of spectacular landscapes, ancient cities, fascinating history, and legendary hospitality. Covering around 447,000 square kilometers and home to more than 35 million people, it is the most populous country in Central Asia. Much of the land is desert and mountains, while fertile valleys and ancient cities have supported civilizations for thousands of years. The capital, Tashkent, is the country's largest city and main gateway for visitors. During the Soviet era, it became a major commercial center and once was the third largest city in the Soviet Union after Moscow and St. Petersburg. Uzbekistan is also geographically unusual. It is completely landlocked and one of only two doubly landlocked countries in the world. It once bordered the enormous Aral Sea, which dramatically shrank after decades of water diversion. But the country is rich in more than history. Uzbekistan has major reserves of gold, uranium, natural gas, oil, and coal, while cotton remains an important agricultural product. For centuries, however, its greatest advantage was its location. Uzbekistan stood directly along the ancient Silk Road, connecting China with Europe. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara became wealthy centers of trade, science, culture, and learning. Alexander the Great passed through these lands, while Genghis Khan later devastated much of the region. Centuries afterward, the great ruler Timur transformed Samarkand into a magnificent center of architecture, science, and culture. Eventually, the Silk Road declined, and Russian influence expanded. Uzbekistan became part of the Russian Empire, later the Soviet Union, before gaining independence in 1991 following the collapse of the USSR. Today, the country's past remains deeply visible. More than 90% of the population identifies as Muslim. Uzbek is the official language, while Russian remains widely spoken, particularly in cities. Uzbek itself is a Turkic language, sharing similarities with Turkish and other Turkic languages. For travelers, Uzbekistan can also be surprisingly affordable. Local markets are filled with inexpensive food, fresh fruit, nuts, meat, and traditional bread, and bread is everywhere. Uzbek bread is thick, dense, and traditionally baked in clay ovens. It is treated with enormous respect and remains an essential part of everyday life. Meat is equally important. Kebabs, samsa, rice dishes, and other traditional foods are common, but nothing is more famous than Uzbek plov. Usually prepared with rice, lamb, carrots, onions, and garlic, plov is more than a meal. It is part of Uzbekistan's cultural identity. Then there is Uzbek hospitality. Visitors are often welcomed warmly, and in rural communities it is not unusual for families to invite guests into their homes, serve them food, and insist that they stay longer. Tea is another important part of daily life, enjoyed throughout the day alongside bread and snacks. Yet Uzbekistan is not frozen in the past. Tashkent is a modern city filled with wide streets, restaurants, shopping centers, nightlife, and a Soviet-built metro. Opened in 1977, it was the first metro system in Central Asia, and its stations are famous for their elaborate designs. Another striking feature is the dominance of Chevrolet cars. Local production has made them extremely common, and in many Uzbek cities, it can feel as though Chevrolets are everywhere. But outside Tashkent, life becomes much more traditional. Smaller cities and rural communities continue to preserve customs involving family, crafts, traditional sports, and rural lifestyles. And for history lovers, Uzbekistan is extraordinary. Samarkand is perhaps the country's most famous destination. Once a powerful Silk Road center, it is home to spectacular Islamic architecture and the legendary Registan Square. Bukhara is another historical treasure. Once one of the most important cities on the Silk Road, it contains monuments centuries old, including the famous Kalian Minaret, built in 1127. Then there is Khiva, where walking through the preserved historic center can feel like stepping into another century. Ancient mosques, minarets, markets, and traditional buildings dominate the landscape. But Uzbekistan has also experienced tragedy. In 1966, a massive earthquake devastated Tashkent, destroying tens of thousands of buildings and leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. With major Soviet assistance, the city was rebuilt, creating much of the architecture and infrastructure still visible today. Despite modernization, challenges remain. Average incomes are relatively low, and many young Uzbeks seek better-paying opportunities abroad. Economic opportunities also vary greatly between major cities and rural areas. The climate can be demanding too. Summers in Tashkent, Samarkand, and Bukhara can reach or exceed 40 degrees Celsius, making spring and autumn the most comfortable seasons for visitors. The heat does, however, create one great pleasure of Uzbekistan: incredible fresh produce. Markets overflow with melons, grapes, peaches, nuts, and other fruits at remarkably affordable prices. And when the sun goes down, the country comes alive. Restaurants and public squares fill with music, food, and traditional dancing. In cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Tashkent, visitors can experience colorful costumes and graceful Central Asian performances, while the larger cities also offer modern restaurants, bars, and nightlife. Yet perhaps Uzbekistan's greatest attraction is the combination of contrasts. Here's Soviet apartment blocks stand alongside centuries-old Islamic architecture. Modern cities exist beside ancient Silk Road settlements. Turkic traditions blend with Islamic culture, while Russian influences remain visible in language, architecture, and daily life. For someone earning a foreign income, Uzbekistan can be relatively affordable and incredibly rewarding. For locals, however, lower wages and limited opportunities can make life considerably more difficult, particularly outside the major cities. Still, if you're looking for ancient history, extraordinary architecture, incredible food, and genuine hospitality, few countries in Central Asia offer quite the same experience. From the legendary streets of Samarkand and Bukhara to the modern energy of Tashkent, Uzbekistan is a country where the ancient and modern exist side by side. And perhaps that's what makes it so fascinating. This is Uzbekistan, a country shaped by empires, the Silk Road, Soviet history, and centuries of tradition, now stepping confidently into the modern world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed exploring the real side of Uzbekistan, make sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories from around the world. See you in the next one.